All right, you're watching Headlines Today. I'm Sana Khan. Let's get started with the big news coming in. It's a landmark decision on the inclusion of tainted netas in central posts or cabinet berths, a decision that could very well be double-edged sword for the governments. Now, rejecting a PIL against tainted ministers, the Supreme Court made it clear that it was the prerogative of the Prime Minister to choose his ministers. The court, however, observing that the Prime Minister and the Chief Ministers were expected to act as per the constitutional trust reposed in them and should not include people with criminal antecedents in their cabinet. Hearing a petition on tainted ministers, the Apex Court refused to encroach on this legislative right of the Prime Minister.
कोर्ट ने मेरा ये पिटीशन था कि क्या ऐसे आदमी जिनके अगेंस्ट में गंभीर आपराधिक मामले चल रहे हैं, चार्जशीट सबमिट हो चुके हैं, कॉन्वियंस ले दिए, ऐसे आदमी क्या मिनिस्टर, प्राइम मिनिस्टर, चीफ मिनिस्टर बहाल हो सकते हैं? कोर्ट में 3 जजमेंट आए हैं। जो मेजॉरिटी जजमेंट है उन्होंने कहा कि नहीं, संविधान का जो ऐसे कोई रिस्ट्रिक्शंस नहीं है प्राइम मिनिस्टर पर एक्सप्लिसिटली, लेकिन प्राइम मिनिस्टर को और चीफ मिनिस्टर को चाहिए कि ऐसे किसी आदमी को जिनके अगेंस्ट में चार्जशीट सबमिट हो गया हो गंभीर मामले में, या कॉन्वियंस ले जा चुका हो या चार्ज फ्रेम हो चुका हो, उन्हें मिनिस्टर नहीं अपॉइंट करें। ये उनका ये वैसे एडवाइजरी देखने में लगता है, लेकिन ये मैंडेटरी हुआ। प्राइम मिनिस्टर और चीफ मिनिस्टर को इस बात को माननी पड़ेगी। जस्टिस कोरियन जोफेट ने तो स्पष्ट शब्दों में कहा है कि नहीं, ये मैंडेटरी है कि ऐसे लोगों को मिनिस्टर नहीं बनाया जाए। ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की जो स्पिरिट है उसके खिलाफ है। हालांकि एक एस्पेक्ट में कोर्ट ने कुछ नहीं कहा है। मेरा ये कहना था कि क्या ऐसे आदमी जिनके अगेंस्ट में इस तरह के क्रिमिनल केसेज हैं, वो प्राइम मिनिस्टर और चीफ मिनिस्टर बनाए जा सकते हैं? एक तो हुआ कि मिनिस्टर बनाए जा सकते हैं कि नहीं, और प्राइम मिनिस्टर द्वारा और चीफ मिनिस्टर द्वारा। दूसरी बात है कि क्या ऐसे आदमी जिनके अगेंस्ट में कोई गंभीर आपराधिक मामले का आरोप है, उसमें चार्जशीट सबमिट हो गया है,
आपके मुताबिक ये आदेश जो है ये कितना बाध्यकारी होगा?
पहले मुझे ये तो कंप्लीट करनी है।
शॉर्ट में रखिए।
ऐसे आदमी को क्या प्राइम मिनिस्टर और चीफ मिनिस्टर बनाया जा सकता है? इसके बारे में कोर्ट ने कुछ नहीं कहा है, और मैं इसके लिए एक क्लैरिफिकेशन पिटीशन फाइल करूंगा कि क्या ऐसे आदमी के बारे में जो जिनके अगेंस्ट में गंभीर आपराधिक मामले हैं, प्राइम मिनिस्टर और चीफ मिनिस्टर बनाए जा सकते हैं?
And a short while ago, we spoke to Congress leader Manish Tiwari, Congress's first reaction on the Supreme Court's ruling.
Has obviously upheld the obvious, which is the doctrine of separation of powers, which is intrinsic to the Constitution, that the executive, the legislature and the judiciary operate in separate domains. But the Supreme Court has also underlined and underscored a very important obiter dicta that it hopes and wishes that the Prime Minister would not include any tainted minister in his Council of Ministers. So therefore, now it is for the Prime Minister of India to really tell the people, does he agree with the observation of the Supreme Court or not? And if he does agree with the observation of the Supreme Court, would he try and find out that are there any charge-cheated people in his cabinet? And if at all there are any charge-cheated or tainted people in his cabinet, would he then take the next step and drop them? So therefore, I think the Supreme Court has put the ball in the court of the Prime Minister. It has reminded the Prime Minister of his responsibility, and the Prime Minister must articulate a response on the obiter dicta of the Supreme Court, whether he agrees or disagrees with the observation of the court.
All right, let me go across to Jaskirat Singh Baba, my colleague who's tracking developments on this big story. Jaskirat, clearly the ball now in the Prime Minister's court. It's up to him whether to make these ministers, tainted ministers, a part of his cabinet or not. A very heavy constitutional responsibility being entrusted not by the fact that he is the Prime Minister of the country, but the Supreme Court in a sense reminding that.
That's correct. Now, the Supreme Court has been very clear in not actually giving any directions, because that would have been seen as judicial overreach or activism by the executive and by the legislative. What they have done is they put the moral onus on the Prime Minister to ensure that his cabinet is clean. This is, of course, can be seen as a follow-up of the electoral reforms judgment, series of judgments that came out from the Supreme Court, since last year, where they have tried to attempt to clamp down on the number of criminally tainted politicians who are in fact trying to either progress in the political fray or re-enter the political fray after they complete their sentence.
All right, Jaskirat, hang on for a bit. Eminent lawyer Katjus Tulsi is now addressing the media. Perhaps on this issue, let's listen in.
किसी के खिलाफ चार्जेस भी फ्रेम हो जाएं तो उसको दोषी नहीं माना जा सकता, ना ही उसको डिस्क्वालीफाई किया जा सकता है। डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन तभी हो सकती है जब के एक फाइनल जजमेंट आ जाए जिसमें कन्विक्शन हो और 2 साल से ज़्यादा सज़ा हो, तब तक डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन नहीं हो सकती। और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने सही किया है, क्योंकि संविधान में एक मूल सिद्धांत है और वो है प्रिजम्पशन ऑफ इनोसेंस टिल प्रूवन गिल्टी। ना तो चार्जशीट उस प्रिजम्पशन को ले सकती है, ना चार्जेस के ऊपर उस प्रिजम्पशन को नकारा जा सकता है। ये अलग बात है कि कुछ आजकल के मीडिया में कुछ स्टार चेम्बर्स जैसी बहस होती है कि इल्ज़ाम लगने से ही कोई किसी लोगों मीडिया को दोषी मान लेते हैं। मैं इस बात से बिल्कुल सहमत नहीं हूँ और ये बिल्कुल गलत है।
सर, लीगली और मोरली ये फैसला कितना अफेक्ट करेगा हमारे पॉलिटिकल एटमॉस्फेयर को?
ये जब सही फैसला है तो संविधान के मुताबिक है। इन्होंने जो कहा है, जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की एडवाइस है प्रधानमंत्री को, उसके ऊपर प्रधानमंत्री विचार करेंगे। उनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रेरोगेटिव है, तो अब उनका दायित्व होगा कि वो किस तरह का इल्ज़ाम है उसको ख्याल में रखते हुए अपना प्रेरोगेटिव को एक्सरसाइज करें। और मैं समझता हूँ कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बिल्कुल सही किया। ये ना तो डायरेक्शन हो सकती है, वो संविधान के विरुद्ध होती, तो बिल्कुल सही फैसला है। मैं इसका स्वागत करता हूँ।
All right, Katjus Tulsi, senior Supreme Court lawyer, welcoming the Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court has advised the Prime Minister that it's up to him, it's his prerogative to choose ministers, even if they have cases against them. So now the ball clearly in the Prime Minister's court. Jaskirat Singh Baba, my colleague, still on the phone line with me. Jaskirat, you were talking about how this, ruling, and now the Prime Minister has to exercise his power in a just manner.
Well, that's right. I was saying that this is basically the Supreme Court putting the moral onus on the Prime Minister to ensure that there are no criminally tainted members in his cabinet. Over here, the Supreme Court, like Mr. Katjus Tulsi was pointing out, refrained from any judicial overreach or anything that could be perceived as judicial activism. However, has made these very clear and very important observations, which is once again in line with a series of judgments coming from the Supreme Court over the past 1 year or so, where they have repeatedly tried to clamp down on criminality within the political class.
Right. Also, Jaskirat, what about these ministers? Now, big question mark over ministers in Modi's cabinet. Uma Bharti, one among them, with 13 criminal cases against her. Because the Prime Minister has to act in a just manner according to the Constitution, can we expect any action from the Prime Minister against these tainted ministers?
Well, if the battle of perception has to be won, especially considering that the new government came to power riding on the wave of anti-corruption as well as development, then of course there will be a moral onus, one can perceive so. The Supreme Court's observations today in no manner can be enforced because this is not the language that was used by the Supreme Court. It was, of course, putting the moral onus in the Prime Minister's office to ensure that the people selected in the cabinet are in fact clean of any criminal taint. So yes, once again, this is only going to be a moral obligation on the Prime Minister's behalf to ensure that this word by the Supreme Court is carried out in letter and spirit.
All right, Jaskirat Singh Baba, thanks so much for joining us, giving us inputs on that big story we're tracking.